Hi everyone, Professor Lady here. So I'm going to talk about the full almost 3-hour video interview with Jake Barber by Russ Coulthart on News Nation. This, everyone, was one of the most riveting, consequential, important interviews, things I have ever seen in my life. I was essentially in tears at the end. It is just revealing. It is mind-blowing. It is every adjective you can think of. And I believe every minute of it, every word he says, basically. Yes, I do. I do believe Jake Barber is the real deal, and he is telling us the truth. So please, it is maybe 2 hours, 45 minutes of interview material with Jake directly, and watch it in batches over a week. You won't be disappointed. Every American should have watched this interview. Every American should be aware of what this man is saying. So I did a first video with the overview based on the 1 hour interview that was initially released. Now I'm going to fill in some of the details, some of the other details and the key points from the whole interview. But don't take it from me. You must see it. You must. If you are interested in UAP, non-human intelligence, if you're new to the subject, if you've been reading about it your whole life, you have to hear what this man has to say, okay? So, he assured us that it's not a psyop what he is doing, because he essentially was covert and working in an intelligence position. And Russ Coulthart, asked him a few times, how do we believe you that you're not doing a psyop, a disinformation on us, the American public? And he said, and basically he's like, I'm over it. I've been over it. And this happened first. The initial retrieval event happened, I believe, in the early 00s. So this is part of his life now. He is, from his point of view, he's like, I don't need to convince anyone. This is what I've been living. And I have an intuition about people, and I have to tell you, he's the real deal. All right? So this is not a disinformation campaign. He goes into more background about how he got into the position he was in to retrieve craft. I'm not going to go into all of that. You can watch that to get the those details. It was a little confusing. A lot of things, some things, not a lot, but some things were confusing based on the 1 hour of interview material alone, because it was lacking some context, and all of that gets filled in. I'm left with many fewer, if no questions, really, after watching the full interview about his background, how he got into it. But essentially, he was part of a team retrieving military craft, and some of them were not quite human, as I say. Not quite designed by humans, operated by humans, right? So, he talks about his time on the range in the West, doing this work. Now I don't remember where it was. Was it Nevada? It might have been. Test range. Lots of military stuff in the sky. He says 95% is very explainable, which I thought was high. Very interesting. There's a lot of... So if someone without a military background or not aware of what the military's testing has, whatever, in other words, if we saw these things, we would say, aliens, what is that? Oh my God. But he's saying a lot of it is military, and we are very advanced in the things that we are reproducing based on craft that has crashed, or just our engineering, our science. It's a lot more advanced than people may think. So there's some weird things that look off-world, but they're military. But then there's the 5%. So, I won't go into the details again about the egg retrieval and the 8-gon, right? You can see my first video for that. But I just want to reiterate, if I didn't say it the first time, that it was confirmed to him later on that the egg and the 8-gon were, in fact, non-human intelligence. UAPs, not military craft. He's encountered them again through his company Skywatcher, which is his private venture-backed endeavor, which is retrieving, calling in, right, and retrieving an HI craft. And he claims that his company has brought in egg-shaped craft through the psionics process. All right. And ultimately, he says that his Skywatcher group is going to be disclosure. He is absolutely willing to provide videos and evidence to the American people that this is what he's doing, and that they can call in craft using psionics. And he feels like he can work hand in hand with the government, essentially, on disclosure, and he thinks it's going to happen within 12 months. All right, so this only gets more interesting. Please stick with me. So in the first video, I talked about the incredible connection he had to the 8-gon craft, right? Incredible spiritual experience. He was really messed up while he was in that helicopter doing his job, basically experiencing the ethereal energy of some goddess NHI type thing. But this 8-gon craft, incredible. It exuded love and benevolence. So it's either controlled by something. There wasn't an entity in the craft per se, but he's trying to explain that there are these crafts that are controlled by an energy, an entity. I don't know if it's interdimensional, extra-dimensional, spiritual, what, but it wasn't a being in the craft, but he absolutely connected to it, and other members of his team did not. It was only him who had this intense experience connection with this craft. It connected with his mind. Yeah, and he couldn't tell anyone that a goddess made him cry. It just isn't acceptable in the military, you know what I'm saying? So he gets more into psionics. Folks, this gets better and better. Stay with me and my cliff notes here. Watch the whole thing. It gets better. He got involved in the psionics aspect of the program. This program where they're recruiting people to connect with craft and call them in from wherever. He learned a lot about it, and he goes into his childhood a bit and how he was recruited by a particular, it sounds like it was an intelligence program when he was very young, a teenager, and that perhaps they are looking for people who have this ability or demonstrate certain characteristics that they are sensitive or could have this psionic ability. Going back to the end of high school, that gets very interesting. So he describes the psionics program. He says that sometimes they're invited to land, sometimes they're forced to land. Now, I do have a question. Why are they forced to land by these psionics teams? That seems aggressive and forceful, but so I want to know more about that. He starts to talk about possible physical NHI, which is not something he encountered, that these could be soft tissue drones that are not sentient. Sentient meaning having a conscience. He referred to the gray worker bees that we hear about as possibly like lab meat grown drones that aren't actually sentient. But that's not what he was dealing with, grays or biological beings. Now, his colleague, I have not watched this video yet, but Mr. Birch, I believe, has his own interview with Ross Coulthart, and he has been visited by some biological entities in his room, and they're weird. Talking about praying mantises, weird, okay? I haven't seen that yet, but I'll report to you on it when I do. So these crafts are conscious. No creatures inside. They must be channeled with a loving vibe. You have to learn how to do that to be part of this psionics. This is absolutely mind-blowing, guys. He said that there's certain groups of people who are better with the psionics thing, and they're recruiting people worldwide. A lot from indigenous cultures, from developing countries where spirituality, a certain type of spirituality is more accepted, more open. So people from indigenous cultures are often very good at the psionics role. And he said kids, women, and gay men too. It's fascinating. There's a certain sensitivity, right? General sensitivity. I'm not surprised. Not surprised about those groups being not all, it's not like all of them come from those groups, but they seem to have a better connection with what you have to do to channel this loving entity, benevolent entity, something. He believes crafts are being recovered in this way, I guess psionics, or in other ways, all around the world. And I love this quote. I love it. The skies are not classified, and your consciousness cannot be redacted. So the government can't hide what's in our skies. And we can all ultimately be aware of this activity in our skies, these UAP, NHI, and that's for all of us to experience. And we all have a conscience and consciousness that could potentially connect to these entities, and the government cannot control the consciousness of humanity. I thought that was really beautiful. But later on, he does talk about the harnessing of consciousness in a malevolent way, which is something I thought about too. That is concerning. So you can harness a positive, loving consciousness to connect with these entities. What about harnessing or impressing upon someone a negative consciousness to control what they're doing, to influence what they're doing, or malevolent? I believe we all have a certain spiritual energy, right? So a darker spiritual energy, could it do harm to these beings, to these craft, in harnessing consciousness? If this is further developed, could this be could this be weaponized? Psionics and consciousness, and concerning. So yeah, he talks about the difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy by the government, covering up every aspect that that generally that they're here, they exist, they've been visiting us, that secrecy, privacy is okay to conceal some details of craft and science and tech to keep us to keep our secrets and keep our defenses strong, etc. But there's a difference. There's no reason to keep all the secrecy, in his opinion. And he said, there are some rogue groups and private contractors have some rogue breakaway elements, but he doesn't feel we should be talking about the military-industrial complex as one big evil entity. He genuinely believes that the top of the company, the head, who he spoke to, has no knowledge of the rogue elements and their violence and their activities, which is, I don't know, sometimes things can be hidden from the top and compartmentalized actually more down the chain of command. Plausible deniability, or just a rogue element that is not coming from the top. I don't know. But he says he's not afraid for his life. So as I'm going through watching this interview, I'm thinking, this man is telling us everything. Is there gonna be a hit on him or something? He says he's not afraid at all, and he feels that this NHI, this benevolent NHI, is guiding his actions in his life, and you can tell that he genuinely believes this. And when he tells you that, you believe him too. All right, he talks about this craft that was described by a Michael Herrera that was encountered in Sumatra, a huge, huge craft. And he talks about Herrera's version of the events and his perception of what it all meant. And Barber basically says he doesn't have it all right. And this is an interesting story that's been out there about military guys encountering this huge craft in Sumatra and them thinking it was experimental military craft, but allegedly something went down there. I think some people were killed. Actually, there was a firefight between regular military guys and some paramilitary. They weren't supposed to see this craft. Herrera thought it had something to do with drugs. Barber says it wasn't. It's an interesting segue in the interview, but I think getting the background on Herrera's story is important. So he believes that catastrophic disclosure would be catastrophic because that's when the government is forced to disclose in a way that is under a pressurized situation and they can't pick and choose what they disclose. So you can read about that term a bit, catastrophic disclosure. And like I'm always saying in my videos, we don't exactly need the government for disclosure. It would be nice to have a statement. We've been visited. Some UAP in the skies are unknown, and we can't completely deny that entities have interacted with human beings, something like that, right? But Barber, and this is where it gets really moving, he says that we as people have power now to raise our consciousness. The truth is there if you want to find it. And it's true. There's so much information now. Government disclosure to me is almost like could be an after fact, an afterthought at some point, because it's all there and the whistleblowers are putting it all in front of us. And he said there's 3 things that we need to know as people that we're not alone, that there's a profound spiritual element to this phenomenon, and that we don't have to battle for limited resources. And he's really sort of, as the interview goes on, setting the stage for a more positive future for society because of this phenomenon, and that if more people knew what was going on, he feels it would be a more positive future because of less conflict over limited resources, fossil fuels, right? A raising of consciousness, people being aware of the spiritual element of this and not being robbed of that story and those facts and that phenomenon. And you're watching this, you're interested, but think about, I think the majority of people is just whoosh, right? It's too weird, it's too they're just going about the day to day, and either they're not interested or they don't have the capacity because of the stress of life to really find this story and find the truth and make it part of their truth, which I think is a shame. But if these people keep talking, if everyone's consciousness gets raised as more and more stories come out and more people have experiences, I think we will move in that direction. So I cannot emphasize enough how riveting this whole interview is. He says NHI, non-human intelligence, wants us to know that they're here and that they're interacting with us. Oh, he said there's underground bases too. Confirm that. The stuff about raising consciousness was absolutely stirring. I am still trying to take it all in. I have lots of knowledge on this topic, but this interview, word for word, minute by minute, was something different for me. And I almost feel like at this point we need to sort of get this into the textbooks. We need to educate our children about what the real history of UAP and NHI is. Are we at that point? No, but at some point, right? Well, we can't even handle having certain topics in textbooks in schools, so we're going to start talking about NHI. Good luck. But I just felt like, he said, Ross Coulthard said, "What do you want from this, Jake Barber?" And he said, "I would love one day to see a billboard for a school inviting kids to apply for the school where they learn all about this technology, consciousness, 0 point energy, and that it's open, and that our future, our children, are actually learning the truth. And not only learning it, but living it. And using it to actually make the future possible, because we're in a bad place right now. And I believe him that NHI is trying to wake us up. It is so hard to wake some people up, though. With that, watch my first video for the basics about the 1 hour interview, from the 1 hour interview. If you didn't see that already, I hope you watch that first before this, but it'll all come together if you watch both of my videos. Watch the YouTube video of the full interview material with Jake Barber. You will not be disappointed. It will be one of the most amazing things you have ever seen on this topic. Take care. Like and subscribe if this was useful. Like and subscribe if this was useful.